here. Let's get right into it. Let's just give a little bit background. Some of this you remember. Some of this is worth a quick reminder. For 3-4 weeks, we've been learning about the laws of Pidyon Shvuyim, rescuing and saving our hostages. And we've talked about that in great detail. We're now going back to the Rambam Mishneh Torah discussion of laws when going to war. The laws going to war, we learned, stem from Devarim Chaf, chapter 20 of the book of Deuteronomy, into 21. We're going to refresh our memories in a moment by reading that really quickly and then going deeper. That's the verses that tell us God's command when we go into war. First of all, there's two major Kohanim. There's the Kohen Gadol that we associate with the Beit HaMikdash, the high Kohen who is associated with the Holy Temple, offers the sacrifices, goes into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, the Holy of Holies, on Yom Kippur. There's a second very high-ranking Kohen, the Kohen HaMashuach, the anointed Kohen HaMashuach Melchama, who leads the Jews into battle. And that's how Jews would fight. So right away, we see that many of these laws do not apply today. Today, generals lead the Jews into battle, not a religious leader. Also, honestly, Orthodox religious Jews of all dimensions of Orthodoxy go into battle and don't seek exemptions. Maybe a small number, extraordinary Torah learners would not go, maybe, but as a general principle, you wouldn't say, well, because I'm of this particular orientation, I don't go. There's got to be a Beit HaMikdash for some of these rules to apply, and some. So what we are reminding ourselves is that the laws we're learning are at a time of the Beit HaMikdash, the Kohen Gadol, the Kohen HaMashuach Melchama, and even so, to the degree we would think, so then why are we learning this other than intellectual, historical interest, is that it still establishes Jewish ethics and values that carry over into all battle. The idea, for example, that we don't go to slaughter people, that even the nations that we're commanded to attack, we first have to give them an opportunity to leave. We've learned that already. And then those who don't leave, we give them an opportunity to make peace. And so we avoid, if at any point, so-called genocide, since that seems to be the popular term of the useful idiots who march outdoors. And this is part of our ethics and values that carry over even when there's not a Beit HaMikdash, and we're not doing everything, let's say 100%, and in some cases couldn't anyway because they wouldn't be applicable. The idea that we are humanitarian in the first instance, the first order, following actual laws. What other people really, even the blessed United States, of which I live, where I live, I'm a patriot. I mean, nobody talks about really that people should study laws before they go into battle. But a Jew is supposed to learn Torah. A Jew is supposed to be learning Torah and before he goes into battle. And many of the people in yeshivot hester, certain yeshivas in Israel have arrangements, hester. They've got a hester with the army by which during their years of service in the army, they serve in the army, in the military, not just the army, all the different units, Navy, Air Force, and they spend other time learning in yeshiva. So they have a longer term of commitment to serve, because instead of doing their time straight, some time is given off for yeshiva, and then they make it up. So what we're learning, again, are those values. We are also learning that there are values as far as people getting exemptions. In the United States, I remember when I was a college kid during the Vietnam War, there were exemptions. There were exemptions if you're in college. Joe Biden got such an exemption. Clinton had an exemption. I think Trump had an exemption. Obama, of course, never fought. So there were exemptions if you went to college, and people try to use that in politics to say, I served in this or that division of the military, and my opponent never fought. But that's no longer a compelling argument in the United States in the last 20, 30 years, since Clinton, really. And today it's a non-issue. If they put Kamala Harris up, no one sat and asked, well, how's that going to play with the military? It's no longer a factor. But the United States has exemptions. A very big exemption back then was if you were homosexual, they wouldn't take you. And a lot of straight people, they didn't know how to turn straight in those days. Straight meant go from line A to line B. You know, for those of us who go back to the days when straight meant line A to line B, and gay meant happy, as in I feel pretty and witty and gay. And that's what it was then. So if you acted like a homosexual and you convinced the guy, and that was the thing, that the Army knew that a lot of college kids being drafted didn't want to go. And so they knew that they had, I don't even know what their way was to determine whether a claiming homosexual was a homosexual, but anyway, that was a form. And then if you had flat feet, they didn't take you in. And so, but how do you create flat feet without ironing them? But that was the thing. And people who did not have flat feet and couldn't persuade them that they're homosexual cut off a finger, Ribono Shel Olam. Or they went to Canada. And what does it tell you about Canada? That people would rather cut off a finger than go to Canada. But that's how they would get exemptions. And then there was the exemption for being divinity, 4D. I still remember this. 4F was if you were physically flawed, and 4D was a divinity exception. And all of these people in all the different religious orientations suddenly started going to seminary. There was this great religious awakening during the Vietnam War. And that's where a lot of the Reform rabbis came out of. The Orthodox were learning in yeshiva anyway. We had all these kids suddenly signing up for HUC to study to be rabbis. They didn't become, they stayed in until the end of the war, and then they lost their, and then the call left, and they got called for something else. But we see that in America, there were exemptions. So the Torah tells us there are exemptions in Judaism. And it's important for us to know this, even if there's no Beit HaMikdash today, because it enlightens us to the notion that we don't compel certain people to fight. For example, someone who's just getting married. We're going to learn this in greater depth in the Gemara, but someone who's getting married. So for the first year, they don't go in the army. When I say army, a Navy, Air Force, the military. Have a year with your wife. Oh, by the way, it's a given, only men serve. Women do not serve. It's an issue of tzniut, that men and women serving together in the same unit, it's going to lead to physical contact and forbidden activities, even babies, abortions. It just didn't happen under Torah law. That wasn't the role of women, just as in the United States until comparatively recently, women did not serve. And if there ever is a return to the draft, there's like a debate going on now whether the draft in the future, if they have a draft, that women should also be exposed to the draft. And there's a strong movement. No, you can't draft women, especially among the feminists, except for the uber feminists. So, number one, you don't take people, even if they want to go. You don't take people the first year of their marriage. You don't take people who just built a home. I built a home. What I mean I built a home, I didn't take a hammer and nails, but I did the next worst thing, not the next best thing. I built a home in Israel, in Karnei Shomron, during the years 1985 to 1987. I was part of 35 young families in Brooklyn and Queens who started a new yeshuv, a new Jewish settlement in occupied Arab lands. And today, there's thousands and thousands of Jews living there. It'll never be given up. And we were among them. And when I say we built it, we sat with an adrichal, an architect, and went over plans of the house. He had a basic model, and then he flew in from Israel and met with the 35 of us families in general, then privately, and we were able to make our own individual modifications. And then he went back and he built the houses, did not include any of the modifications we gave him, or he did them wrong. But we built a house. There was just a flat piece of empty ground. And next thing you knew, we had a house. We built a house. According to the halacha, that first year of living in the house, we would not go in the army. If you've gone through, and even in America, if you've ever built a house from scratch, from plans, the aggravation and effort that goes through it, when you finally get to live in that house. So the halacha was, let a Jew enjoy his house for 1 year before you bring him in the army. And furthermore, someone who planted a kerem, a vineyard, would not go to the army the first year. It could be a vineyard, and we'll learn in the Gemara other things as well. Because again, when you plant a vineyard, it's not like suddenly grapes are popping out of the wall. You need to plant, and you need to water, and you need for it to grow. When you finally reach the day that you have your vineyard, so the Torah said, let the guy enjoy his grapes for a year. And then on the other hand, people who truly are afraid, I hate to say coward, because it's a judgment call, and everybody is made out of different stuff. And in most cases, I would never use the word coward. I just don't like to be judgmental in that way. I would sooner call a person a coward if there is a public discussion and you know a certain person believes a certain thing but is scared to say it in public. That's a coward. But sometimes a person can't, they're just terrified to go to war. Everybody who's normal, you don't just go in there like you're going to a baseball game, but people go with. And those who truly are shivering with cowardice or fear, Torah says they shouldn't go because they will destroy the morale of everybody else. And you don't need to hear that. You need a band of brothers. You need people who are there psyching on each other. And you don't need people there who want to get out. And better that they not go in. And we learned that in Vietnam. If you force people to go in and they really are terrified, they destroy the morale of a nation. And so, and I'm not saying, by the way, that the Vietnam War was right or wrong. I don't want to get into that. I have my own feelings. But this is the foundation of what we learned. We covered a bunch of this already for many weeks. Then we hit the point about the Pidyon Shvuyim, and now we go back. One more word. You'll remember there were 7 nations that were particularly named by God, designated. These are the Canaanite nations that will have to be extirpated in order for the Jews to enter the land of Israel. And we learned it before, the Chivi, the Yevusi, the Girgashi, etc., etc. The Hitti, the Canaani, the Amori, the 7 nations of the Canaanites that would have to be destroyed. And that's one package. And then there are 3 other nations that are not in the 7-nation package. They're a different group. Edom, Ammon, and Moav. And they are a complex situation. Edom, well, our father Yaakov, Jacob, was twin brothers with the bad brother Esav, who also is known as Edom. They both were born to Yitzchak and Rivka. Edom, Esav wanted to kill Yaakov at one point, and we won't get into all that now. They became a nation, and they became a tough nation for us to deal with. But we were commanded never to fight war with them unless they start a war with us, but never to initiate a war with them, ever. Never to take an inch of their land or a millimeter or centimeter of their land, because God gave land to Edom, the children of Esav, as a gift to Yitzchak and Rivka. Edom, Esav, was their child, and no matter how he came out, for God's love of Yitzchak, through whom he went on to extend the bracha to Yaakov and the Jewish people, even Esav, the bad one, his people, Edom, we are commanded to leave them alone. Unless they make war against us, then all bets are off. And the same from Moav and Ammon. Moav and Ammon. Abraham, on his travels with his wife Sarah, also was accompanied by Lot, his nephew, the son of Haran, Abraham's brother who died prematurely, another story we won't go into now. So Lot went everywhere with Abraham and consequently was blessed by God enormously. Lot ended up almost as wealthy as Abraham. In fact, he had so much sheep and cattle, which in those days was wealth. They didn't have bitcoins and other coins, really. They had some coins, but your wealth was sheep and cattle and jewels, gold and silver. And so he had so much sheep and cattle that his shepherds got the fights with Avram's shepherds. When they tried to graze, there wasn't enough grass for the two of them. And Abraham said, we've got to make peace. Look, there's a big land, like the old American Westerns. You take, this land ain't big enough for the two of us. But he said it lovingly. So he said to Esav, you take whatever half you want, and I'll take the other half. And Esav picked the greenery of Sodom and Amorah, the evil places. And we learned he got kidnapped in the battle, and Avram went and saved his life. And we learned all that. And then when God destroyed Sodom and fire and brimstone came down, Lot fled. We learned this. The wife turned around, became a pillar of salt. And Lot ended up in a cave with the two daughters. And the two daughters thought the whole world had been destroyed. And they thought, if we don't have babies, all of humanity is going to end when the three of us die. They had no idea what's going on outside the cave. So each one got the father drunk and got themselves impregnated by the father. And one of the babies was named Moav, and one was named Ammon. From Moav, a nation came. From Ammon, a nation came. God, the same as with Edom, declared that we have to leave Moav and Ammon alone. Because even though they're on the way, let's say, to going from in the desert from Egypt through the circuitous 40-year path on which God led us after we were punished after the Meraglim, after the sin of the spies. Nevertheless, as he finally brought us in for our journey towards Arutz Israel, we would have to pass the lands of Moab and Ammon. And God said, you may not enter their lands without their permission. You may not take their lands. You may not make war with them. They're off limits. Doesn't matter what. Again, if they attack you, all bets are off. But otherwise, they have like free parking. You can't touch them because they are the descendants of Lot, and it's my gift eternally to Abraham, my beloved Abraham. Because of him, of course, I carry a blessing to Isaac, Yitzchak, Yaakov, us, and secondly, even to Lot, which means Moab and Ammon. So we're not allowed to kill them, and them, or go to war against them, no matter what the strategy would require. It would be equivalent. It would be equivalent if Hezbollah is in Lebanon and you have to, well, it's not equivalent because they're attacking us. But let's say you had to get, I don't know, to Iraq and you have to get through Lebanon. And let's say Lebanon were protected by God. You have to figure out another way to get there. Happens to be that doesn't apply to any. First of all, they're all attacking. So as I've been saying tonight, all bets are off. Second of all, they don't get the same blessing for a whole bunch of reasons. They don't have that blessing. So with all of this as background, let's get into text. Thank you so much for being here. We're now, one more word, we're now in the 3 weeks. Bein HaMitzarim, between the two tragedies of 17 Tammuz and 9 of Av. Sheva Asar B'Tammuz, Tisha B'Av. Let me say a word quickly about that, and then we go forward. The Babylonians, when they made their attack on Israel, when they decided to attack Israel, occupy Eretz Israel, and drive us out of our homeland and destroy our Beit HaMikdash, the final assault began on the 17th of Tammuz when they attacked the gates of Jerusalem. Actually, the 9th of Tammuz. I'll get to that in a second. They then marched through Jerusalem, massacring. It was like October 7 with Hamas every day until the 9th of Av. After 3 weeks, when they reached the Beit HaMikdash and they burnt the Beit HaMikdash, destroyed the Beit HaMikdash, exiled us to Babylonia, where we were for 70 years. And then finally, by God's miracles, we were permitted to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, to go back. The majority stayed in Babylonia. Only a minority went back to Eretz Israel. where they rebuilt Eretz Yisrael, they rebuilt the Beit HaMikdash, and that continued until the time of the Romans, when in the year 70 of the Common Era, the Romans, they decided to make war, and they pierced the walls of Jerusalem on the 17th of Tammuz, and then after 3 weeks burned the second Beit HaMikdash on the 9th of Av. The Gemara, we won't take out the time tonight. The Gemara says, well, if it was the 9th of Tammuz with the Babylonians and the 17th of Tammuz with the Romans, why do we fast on the 17th and not on the 9th? Why is it the 3 weeks instead of the 4 weeks? 9 Tammuz, 9 Av. And the rabbis explain, number one, it's too much fasting to start imposing on people in the middle of the summer another fast every week, because we do a real fast. We don't do like the fasts when people go on political fasts and they drink all day, and like even Ramadan where they fast in the daytime and they eat big meals at night. When we fast, it's real fast, to the degree we don't drink water, you know the deal. So Rabbi said, number one, we just can't do that. So then the question was, which is going to be the 9th of Tammuz of the Babylonian one, or the 17th of Tammuz of the Roman one? And the rabbis said the 17th of Tammuz is the more horrible tragedy, because the 9th of Tammuz tragedy was rectified 70 years later, and the 9th of and the Roman 17th of Tammuz tragedy still had not been rectified. At the time of the rabbis, long after it, and as we now know, even beyond their time, 2,000 years till the state of Israel. And even now, we haven't seen a rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. So the 17th of Tammuz, or the 9th of Tammuz, horrible days, that's when the final assault on Jerusalem began. That's why it's a fast day. Also, you know from what time of year it is. Have you walked outdoors the last few days? It's like 90 degrees in California. I don't know what New York is like right now in other parts of the US, but Southern California temperature is almost identical to Israel temperature year round. And it gets like 90 degrees. And the Romans had a siege, and the Babylonians had a siege. They didn't just come marching in from Roman Babylonia on the 9th or 17th of Tammuz. They laid siege for many months. They didn't do any kind of Geneva War conventions, humanitarian. Let's provide the Jews with food. Let's build a pier for the Jews. They starved us to death. For months and months, they starved us. They cut off the water. And then when it was 90 degrees and 100 degrees, and there was no water, no food for months, then they carved them. And that's when they did it. And they did it, both the Romans and the Babylonians. So that's why the 17th of Tammuz, you feel it. You feel what it is to be without food and water in the middle of July. By the way, Ulysses S. Grant did exactly the same thing. That's how we ended up with one country instead of two countries. Grant laid siege. That's how he won all his wars. He would lay siege. No food, no water comes in. Vicksburg. The same day, July 4, 1863, that the North was winning the last day of Gettysburg. The same day, the third day of the Battle of Gettysburg, when they won the Battle of Gettysburg, that exact same day was the day that Grant completed winning the Battle of Vicksburg, Mississippi. After he had laid siege, starved them, and dried them, thirsty. And then on the July 4th, they couldn't fight anymore, and he took over Vicksburg. So that's how people fought wars. I personally think that's how Israel should have fought this war. But it's so that background on Ammon and Moav is important for what we're going to learn now. Here we go. Optimize the sound. Okay. And we're in. I'm going to take this off. We're going to take that off. And we're in. Reminding you, first of all, quickly in English to make it more quick. So I accidentally got rid of it, so I'll put it back up. Deuteronomy 20. Okay. When you, a Jewish warrior, an Israelite, take the field against your enemies and see horses and chariots, forces larger than yours. That's like going to war, God forbid, against the Arabs, 1948, 1967, 1973. How much they outnumbered us with their airplanes, with their fighter aircraft, and their tanks and their numbers. Have no fear of them. For your God, who brought you from the land of Egypt, is with you. Before you join battle, the priest, that's the Kohen HaMashuach Milchama, that priest about whom I reminded you at the outset of class, shall come forward and deliver a formal speech to the entire army. In those days, there was no air force. He shall say to them, Shema Yisrael, but not the Shema Yisrael you know. Hear, O Israel, you are about to join battle with your enemy. Don't let your courage fail you. Don't be in fear or in panic or in dread of them. Nothing to be afraid of. For God marches with you to battle for you against your enemy to bring you victory. And if you've been learning with us also Tuesday night class, Navi, the idea like that battle where they waited at the last moment for the rustling in the trees, that David HaMelech had complete faith. God will be there marching with us in battle. Then the officials shall address the troops. After the Kohen makes it, then like the generals will make their speech. Is there anyone who has built a new house but has not dedicated it? Let him go back to his home, lest he die in battle, and another man comes and dedicates his house. Is there anyone who planted a vineyard but hasn't harvested it? Let him go back to his home, lest he die in battle, and another man comes and harvests it. Is there anybody here who has paid the bride price for a wife? He's basically done an engagement. He's engaged to marry, and he has not yet taken her to be married. Let him go home, get married, have a year with her, lest he die in battle, and another take her as his wife. The official shall go on addressing the troops and say, is there anyone here who's horribly scared, afraid and disheartened? Yarei Rachalev, terrified and weak of heart. Let him go back home, lest the courage of his comrades get dissolved and melted, yimas, that they be melted by his fear. And then when the officials finish addressing the troops, the army commander shall get started, and let's go, and this is it. And this is the thing we've learned. When you approach, you first offer them terms of peace. If they make peace, end of story. Otherwise, if they don't surrender, you shall lay siege, etc. And we've learned about all of this. And then we learned this last point. Okay. We didn't learn this yet, so I'm jumping to it now. Then we'll start getting into context. When in your war against a city, you have to besiege it a long time. In other words, you're not yet in the battle, but you're starving them and cutting off their water, and you're surrounding them, and they're dried out. And you're besieging them in order to capture it the way Ulysses S. Grant did. You must not destroy its trees. You're starving them, you're denying them water, but you cannot cut off their trees. You can't do like the Romans, who would salt the soil so that not only were they starving the people and leaving them with no liquid to drink, water, but beyond all that, the people would not be able for years and years to come to be able to plant in those fields because they would be destroyed with salting. We're not allowed to destroy God's land and God's food. You can cut it off, but you can't destroy the trees, wielding the axe against them. You may eat of them, but you must not cut them down. Are trees of the field human to withdraw before you in the besieged city? What he's saying is, they're not going to make war, and they're gods. They're not fighting you, and they're part of God's creation. Leave them alone. Only trees that you know do not yield food may be destroyed. You may cut them down for constructing siege works, right? You're going to build a border, like a fortress, around the borders of the place you're not letting anything in or out. So what are you building it with? You build it with wood. You may cut down trees that aren't giving fruit against a city that is waging war on you until it has been reduced. Okay. So that's a refresher, Rambam. Ammon and Moav, ein sholchin lahem shalom. Whoa. We just learned that when you're going to go to battle, one of the first things you do, and I reminded you at the beginning of class, is that before we start fighting, we offer them peace. We offer them a way out, literally a way to flee. You offer peace, but you don't offer peace to Ammon and Moav. Now, you might say, but Rabbi, didn't we already learn this? Rav, didn't we learn about the 7 nations? Yeah, but that's not Ammon and Moav. That's the Canaanite nations in the land of Israel, who must be dispossessed so that we can inherit the land. Ammon and Moav, they're in the Sinai desert, east of the Jordan River. They're not part of that group. They're a second ball of wax. Ammon and Moav are the descendants of Lot, the nephew of Abraham, who impregnated his 2 daughters that night in the cave. And from Ammon and Moav came 2 nations. So we are supposed to not go to war against them. And yet here we're hearing something different, or maybe different. We'll have to look and understand it better. Ammon and Moav, ein sholchim lahem l'shalom. When you're at the border of Ammon and Moav, you do not say shalom. You do not greet them with peace. Shne'amar, lo tidrosh shlomam v'tovatam kol yamecha. It says, let me just bring this person in. Every time a person enters, this little floating meeting control comes up. That's the way Zoom is made. Then there's a second thing that pops up. Press escape to show floating meeting control. That's those little black things maybe go on your screen for a moment. Okay. You shall not seek their peace or good all the days of your life. What's that all about? You're supposed to offer peace. What did they do? In fact, they're your relatives. You're not allowed to conquer them. Amru chachamim lefi shenemar v'karata aleha l'shalom yochol Ammon v'Moav ken. The rabbis say, look, it says in what we refreshed our memories, it says that when you're going to war, when you're going to war to make war, when you're going to a city to make war, v'karata aleha l'shalom, you're supposed to first offer them peace. Namely, they should give up. They should just give up and shalom aleichem. There's no problem. Shalom al Yisrael. So why we would think even Ammon and Moav, certainly Ammon and Moav. So the rabbis say, why is it that the Torah adds separately in Parak Chaf Gimel, Pasuk Zayin, 23:7? Let's take a look, and we'll see. We are commanded. It's fascinating. Chapter 23. It's 3 chapters after the chapter about going to war. First, it tells us people who are not allowed to marry into the Jewish people. And then, lo yavo mamzer b'kal Hashem. A bastard, that's a legal concept, is not allowed to marry a Jew. So let's take a moment about that. Because a bastard is someone born out of adultery or incest for our purposes. And adultery, as I've taught before, is a man, doesn't matter whether he's married, with a married woman who's not his wife. And we've gone through the thinking and rationale and the context of and the concept of it. So we won't take out that time now. but just a refresher, adultery in Judaism, as it would exist in the Jewish religion, is a man with a married woman. A child born of that union is a mamzer, is a bastard. That child is not allowed to marry a Jew. Whoa. So what are you saying, Rabbi? A Jewish man commits adultery with another Jewish man's Jewish wife, and that Jewish child has to marry a non-Jew. How can it be? How can it be? Elsewhere in the Talmud and the Halacha, we don't have time to go into it now, we learn that a mamzer is allowed to marry another mamzer. A male mamzer may marry a female mamzeret, and may marry a convert. Since the mamzer is not allowed to marry into the Jewish people, even though the convert becomes a member of the Jewish people, that person is not regarded, having not been born a Jew, though becoming a 1,000% Jew, is considered permitted to a mamzer. And a mamzer, like when it's used in common street language, oh, this person's a mamzer. So it's an insult, like in English, the way the word bastard is used. But halachically, it carries a stigma in a different world, in a different society. In this morally corrupt American society, for example, Western society, England, France, the whole bunch of, not to mention the others. I mean, look what goes on. So it doesn't have the same, but in halacha, and for those for whom it like when I'm involved in trying to help somebody find a boyfriend or girlfriend to marry, it's a subject that sometimes comes up. And it comes up. And comes up just like there's another subject with Kohen, we won't get into that. It's another story. Here's a really interesting aside that's very, very relevant to the mamzer part. So we just said a man with a married woman having a baby. And we also said it's not like street talk mamzer. It's a legalistic thing. It's a tremendous problem in America and all the Western societies ever since the founding of Reform Judaism. They screwed everything up. Reform Judaism, once in a while, I'd appreciate if you don't tell this to any Reform rabbi, I don't have to have the hassle, but every so often they hear I say it, and it shows up on YouTube, someone picks it up and passes it. Reform Judaism is the worst curse that ever happened to the Jewish people. It is worst curse. I don't want to spell out what it's worse than, but it's even worse than that. Because Reform Judaism has completely destroyed the very concept of who is a Jew. You see 5,000 people demonstrating against Netanyahu yesterday outside Washington while he's trying to defend Israel, whatever your feelings about Bibi. He's there trying to put Israel's best foot forward in Congress. And you've got people wearing signs, not in my name, Jewish voice of peace. These are not Jews. And I'm not saying that because there's such bad politics that they're not. Bernie Sanders is a Jew. George Soros is a Jew. I'm not saying blanketly, but I'm telling you the vast majority of them grew up in Reform temples from non-Jewish mothers because Reform Judaism in 1973 said that you could have a Jewish father with a non-Jewish mother, and that's a Jew. So Goyim, non-Jews, since 1973, how many years is that? It's 51, 52 years now. It's like 2 generations. That's the majority of Reform temples. Their own leader, Rick Jacobs, has said it. I've got it documented in his speech. The majority of Reform members now are non-Jewish. And then their kids, these are not kids out of yeshiva that are saying, not in my name, Jewish voice for peace. That's not the kids. You don't see those kids. Yeah, you see a few of them with talises, talesim, talitot, and kippot. Girls, women with them. It's all part of the same shtick. Why am I getting into this now? So there are tremendous, here's a problem that Reform brought about. Listen to this. If Reform is telling people stuff like this, do you know how many cases, look, How many marriages in America turn into divorces? Unfortunately, like half. I'm not going to give you exact number, but you all know this. Jewish, non-Jewish, half of marriages turn into divorce. Okay, tragedy. And a lot of these are two very good people, fine people on both sides, who it just didn't work. And they get remarried and have a wonderful marriage. I had a divorce, and my former wife is remarried, has a good marriage. I married Ellen. When she passed away, I married Denise. I have wonderful marriages. Okay. Imagine a Reformed couple, even if they were married by an Orthodox rabbi, especially if they were married by an Orthodox rabbi, then they become, but they're really Reformed. They just got married by an Orthodox rabbi because their parents wanted. Now they get divorced, and they go on their merry way, and each one gets married again. When that Reformed divorced wife gets married and has kids, the children are mamzers, because she never got a get. So this innocent new Jewish husband, who innocently has gone through the problem of filing for a marriage license and got a Reform rabbi, conservative rabbi to do the wedding with a chuppah, and they did it all with the ring, with the 7 times around. He, unrealizingly, he is now with a Jewish woman who has not been divorced. Yeah, she has a divorce from the state of California or whatever. She's not divorced. They have children. The children are mamzers. By now, half the Jewish people would be mamzers. And then they're marrying into the Jewish people, which means all of their kids, by definition, a mamzer who marries a Jew other than a mamzer is a mamzer. Only if a mamzer marries a mamzer, the halacha is that the child is a proper Jew, and the problem ends. So he went to Rav Moshe Feinstein with this problem. Rav Moshe Feinstein, who is the greatest rabbinical authority of his time. And it got to the point that everybody, rabbis all over, asked him the toughest questions. And not to mention other people, there are like 8-10 volumes in small font of his answers to questions he was asked. And through always, not just a short, but like a Supreme Court opinion, like a 10-20 page opinion, explaining sometimes a 30 to 40 page opinion. And he explained through his analysis, he didn't talk glibly the way I'm talking glibly now, but he basically said, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is none of the children are mamzerim. The bad news is that the first marriage never was a marriage. If you were married by a Reform rabbi to begin with, you weren't married either. So you lived in sin with your first marriage your whole life. The only problem is if you were married Orthodox and then got divorced without a get. That's a separate story. But 90% of the problems of people born to divorced Jewish women who then remarry but never got a get, the good news is they never had a kosher ketubah. But the Reform rabbi gave me a ketubah. Don't worry about the Reform rabbi's ketubah. It wasn't kosher. It wasn't done by a kosher rabbi. The witnesses weren't kosher. The whole thing wasn't kosher. There wasn't a kosher yichud room. There wasn't a kosher, the whole thing wasn't kosher. What are you talking about? So Rav Moshe was a tremendous insight that since there was never, it means halachically, your mother and father lived in sin the whole life, and you were born from an unmarried couple. But it means you're not a mamzer, so you can marry. Extraordinary. So this Torah area that we're reading here is about people who are not allowed to marry. Okay. So a mamzer is not allowed to marry for 10 generations. No one, misbegotten, so, meaning mamzer. Okay. These translations. No one misbegotten, a mamzer. No one shall be admitted into the congregation. That's why you can marry a convert. Though she or he is becoming a 1,000,000% Jew, they're coming in from outside the congregation. No descendant of such, even in the 10th generation, shall be admitted. Okay. I said a mamzer with a mamzer is a Jew. So I said it too quickly. In the 10th generation, meaning, so they say, what does that mean? Who counts 10 generations? And the answer is no one really counts 10 generations back. Most of us, and especially in those days, they didn't have like ancestry.com. I'm being serious, not kidding. Nobody had ancestry.com, and nobody counted back 10 generations. And the idea was, when it gets to the point that you really don't know whether you descend from a mamzer, so you're no longer a mamzer. That's the halacha. Like, if you're a Jewish kid and you know you're a mamzer, do you tell your kid? Unless you're really frum, you probably don't tell him or her. And then does she tell him? By 3, 4, 5 generations, they're not telling anybody anymore. It's like when you meet these people who say, these non-Jews who say, I just went on Ancestry or something like that. I just found out that my great-grandmother was Jewish. Or they got the DNA test, and they just found out that they're 98% Jewish. So in the same way, after 3, 4 generations is forgotten. When a mamzer marries in, after that, he's no longer a mamzer when people don't know he's a mamzer, including himself. Here we go. Next, lo yavo Ammoni uMoavi b'kahal Hashem. Someone who descends from the Ammonites or the Moabites may never marry a Jew. What about Ruth of Shavuot fame? Ruth HaMoaviyah, Ruth the Moabitess. The rabbis learn in the Talmud, we won't take time out for it, that the halacha refers to a Moavi and not a Moaviyah. It's specifically referring to a male, not a female. There's a lot to talk about. We won't do it now, another time. Just like a mamzer, an Ammonite and a Moabite may never marry into the Jewish people. Same wording. Lo yavo lo b'kahal Hashem, lo yavo lahem, plural, b'kahal Hashem, ad olam, forever. But it says till the 10 generations. I just explained 4 or 5 generations down, who knows? Who knows who's from? How many of you really know 5, 10 generations down? So, but what's the deal? Why the Moav and the Ammon? Al devar asher lo kidmu etchem balechem u'v'mayim. Because when you got out of Egypt, they stand out in Jewish history that they would not give you bread or water. As you were leaving Egypt. And also the Moabites hired Bilam, the evil prophet, to try to place a curse on the Jews. So because of that, and then it goes on that God did not listen to Bilam, and he turned all of his curses to blessings. But the bottom line is, because Moav and Ammon did not give you water and bread when you got out of Egypt, therefore, even as you're not allowed to go out of your way to make war against them, you're not required to make peace with them. You shouldn't make peace because they did not give you bread and water. Let's go on with this. Reminding ourselves that we got onto this from Rambam. Because Rambam was saying, Ammon and Moav ein shochem l'shalom. We were just talking about going into war, and the anointed Kohen is leading the way, and they're making the speeches. We just refreshed our memories with Deuteronomy 20, Devarim Paraklaf, and suddenly Rambam says, but this doesn't apply when you go to war with Ammon and Moav. Ramban, just a little piece of it because it's very long. Ramban, Rav Moshe ben Nachman, he talks about this verse, that the reason Ammon and Moav is singled out because they did not give us bread and water. I'm doing it in English because it's easier and quicker. Okay, let's see if I can find this. It appears to me, that's to Ramban, that scripture banned these 2 brothers, Ammon and Moav. Remember that they're the sons of Lot, right? Lot in the cave with the 2 daughters. He banned these 2 brothers, that is, nations that arose from those 2 brothers, from the congregation of Israel because they were the beneficiaries of the loving kindness of Avram, who saved their father and mother from the sword and captivity. Avraham saved Lot, who would have been dead in Sodom. And he saved Lot, who would have been dead when he was taken hostage in the war of the 4 kings against the 5 kings, all of which we've learned by now. But Abraham kept saving him his life. And by virtue of his Abraham relation, God sent 2 messengers, angels, to save him from Sodom. And by virtue of Abraham's merit, God sent them out of the midst of the overthrow of Sodom. Therefore, for goodness sakes, basic decency, they were obligated, Ammon and Moav, those 2 nations, who would soon be, they didn't exist at that moment yet, because they weren't born yet when Lot was being rescued from the battlefield and saved from Sodom. But soon after they were conceived. They were obligated to do good to Israel, that it should be part of their national heritage, that we are good to the Jews. We're good to Israel. We don't know how long it's going to last, but there's sort of like a little bit of a national heritage in America the last 20, 30 years, a bipartisan support of Israel. Don't want to get into the politics now and all of that, but just like there's kind of a 30-year, 40-year heritage since the 1960s, that America stands with us, it's 50 years, 60 years, that America stands with Israel like an alliance. And again, I don't want to get into whether it really is, etc., but I'm just giving an example. So Ammon and Moav needed to have such an approach to the people of Israel, that they're not your enemy, they're your ally. And instead, Ammon and Moav did them evil. One of them, Moav, hired Bilam, the son of Beor, the evil prophet, against Israel. And the other one, the Ammonites, did not meet them with bread and water. As they approached their territory, the Jews were on the way, needed to get through the land of Ammon, and Ammon wouldn't let us go. What's that all about? Let's look at Sforno. Rabbi Sforno takes it a little more. Neither of these 2 nations met the Israelites. So it turns out it's not that the Israelites were like on their border per se, but the Moabites at least gave them bread and water in return for money. You may remember, we read that another time, I won't take it out now. But Moav was willing. You may remember there were some nations that raced armies to their borders, telling the Jews, don't you dare cross our border. And Moshe said, we won't damage anything, we'll just go straight through the King's Highway, El Camino Royale, Derech HaMelech, and anything we need for water and food we'll pay for. And they set up armies, Sichon and Og, you're not coming in, so we went to war. But Moav at least said, okay, we'll sell you bread and water. And there would not have been a problem with Moav, except that they later on, at a later time, hired Bilam the prophet. It says, okay, I'll get to that in a moment. The Ammonites did not even sell us bread and water. And that's why they're on that list of never being wished peace. And however, the Moabites added to their sin of hostility by hiring the prophet Bilam, etc., etc. Continuing. In Devarim Perkbet, Deuteronomy 2, that's where we're reminded how Moshe tried to go through certain territories en route to Israel and asked countries, can I just get through? Can we go through and we'll pay? And so, for example, and this is due to Devarim. So this is when he's reviewing to the nation in the 40th year everything they have experienced and beheld during the prior 38 years while wandering in the desert. Then I sent messengers from the wilderness of Kedemot, the king Sichon of Heshbon, with an offer of peace. Let me pass through your country. I will keep strictly to the highway, turning off neither to the right nor the left. What food I eat, you will supply for money, and what water I drink, you will furnish for money. Just let me pass through. And of course, he's speaking in singular on behalf of his nation. As the descendants of Esau, Edom, who dwell in Seir, did for me, the Edomites did that. So Moshe is reminding the nation on the 40th year that Edom, the descendants of Esav, who had been the brother of Yaakov, did have that much of an historic alliance with the Jews, that they gave us bread and water, as did the descendants of Esav, and the Moabites who dwell in Ar. Now, why am I reading it from Deuteronomy 2, Devarim Perek Bet? Because previously there is no account when it happened of the Jews getting bread and water from Moav. There is an account of Esav, but not of Moav. There is an account in the book of Bamidbar, Numbers, of the encounters with Sichon and with Og, but there's no narrative of the bread and water part of the Moav encounter. Later in Bamidbar, there is the encounter with Moav regarding the evil prophet Bilam. So we learn instead from Devarim Perek Bet, Deuteronomy 2, where Moshe is reminding everybody what they've been through, that, it does turn out that they, the Moabites, did give water and food. As the descendants of Esav did for me, and the Moabites who dwell in Ar, that I may cross the Jordan. From this we see the Moabites did, and the rabbis learn out. He never says that the Ammonites did. So we learn that the Ammonites didn't. Ammon did not give us bread and water. Moav did. So Ammon we can never have peace with. Moav we would be able to have peace with, except they go and they bring in Balak. So because of this, that's why Rambam teaches us that Ammon and Moav ein sholchem l'shalom. That's how it goes. How far does this concept go? Do not seek their peace and welfare for all your days. Our sages Chazal declared, although it is written, offer a peaceful settlement, does this apply to Ammon and Moav too? Well, Torah says, do not seek their peace and welfare. Although it is written, he must be allowed to live alongside you in your midst. Does this apply to Ammon and Moav? No. The Torah also forbids their welfare. Even though we should not offer them a peaceful settlement, if they sue for peace, we may accept their offer. So we don't have to go to war with them, but it is on them to ask for peace. Like, again, it would be if we were to apply it sort of to the modern period, Israel is asked how many times Hamas to give up. Give up, surrender, end of story, and give us the hostages, end of story. So I'm applying this, it's not exact, but it's kind of like it. If you would apply what we just learned, when it comes to Ammon and Moav, you don't even have to say to them, we'll have peace if you surrender and give us the hot. You just go in and wipe them out. Unless they stop at some point and say, white flag, surrender, surrender. At which point, then you leave them alone. But until you don't get Biden and Blinken and the internet and Qatar, and you don't get all these characters, and Macron, and you don't get all these characters getting there with shuttle diplomacy, trying to get Israel according to the halacha with Moav and Ammon. There's absolutely no requirement. Not only is it no requirement, you're not allowed. You're not allowed to greet them with peace. The Arabs are not Ammon and Moav, so let's not mistake where I'm going with this. I'm talking about Ammon and Moav, but you're not allowed to greet them with peace. If for some reason you have to make war with them, let's say they shoot a rocket into your territory, one rocket, or they shoot one incendiary balloon. They shoot a balloon under the border that's got a fire, and it starts a fire, a forest fire. And you have a reason to go. They've attacked first. You have a reason to go. You're allowed to wipe them out completely unless they sue for peace. And not just sue for peace like Hamas. Oh, we're ready to meet peace. As long as Israel this, and as long as Israel that, give us 1,000 of our terrorists, and we'll give you 30 out of 140 hostages. No. You go in, and until they say, we completely surrender on everything that you're demanding, unconditional surrender. But at that point, because they're Ammon and Moav, at that point you stop. So what do we take away from it for tonight? We take away that we are not we are not Genghis Khan, or John Kerry pronounced it Genghis Khan when he testified against America in the 1960s in Congress. We're not like Genghis Khan, and all these barbarians. And frankly, the Muslims certainly in the 600s, who just went around butchering people, or all the different peoples of the world that have fought. We're just not like that. We have core values, and these are values we don't need anybody outside to preach to us. All they have to do is surrender. And it would sound kind of like hokey if you go to an audience and say, we're nice people, we attack anywhere we like, and all they have to do is surrender. Well, it doesn't sound very nice. But if the other side attacks you, you're allowed to fight until they give up. When Ulysses S. Grant and all the generals of the North went to war against the South started the war. They shot at the North. From Fort McHenry, no, that's Star Spangled Banner. From Fort, I'll figure
Sumter.
it out. No. Which one?
Sumter.
There you go. There you go. We have a good class. We have a great class. So we shot from Fort Sumter. When General Beauregard shot at General Anderson, it started the war. Once the North went into the South, the idea is, here it is. They used to say about Ulysses S. Grant, Ulysses Simpson Grant, U.S. Grant. They used to say that U.S. stands for unconditional surrender. And that's it. There's no negotiations. As soon as you give up, completely give up. So in other words, why am I talking about the Civil War now, as we close for today? Because this is moral. This is ethical. These crazy values and ethics that they want to throw on the Jewish people and in Israel with a so-called International Court of Justice that sees criminality. I just took on my Sunday class 2 weeks ago. You saw what's going on in Sudan, in the Darfur region. Nobody does anything about anything. The only ones they go after, and they preach morality and ethics to us, these are people who come from traditions where they eat people. They're cannibals. So now they're not cannibals for 1 or 2 generations, though Biden says that his uncle encountered cannibals. So, and they're preaching humanitarian and all of this to us. It's outrageous. It's important for us to understand how it goes. So Rambam is saying, when you go to war, you have to offer peace at the outset. And when they don't take it and you have no choice, you offer peace until they say no, except with Moav and Ammon. And even with them, if they then say, all right, we were wrong, we give up, then you stop. And that's kind of what happened in 1967. 1967, we begged Jordan stay out of the war. Nasser was absolutely determined to start a war on the Egyptian front, and he coordinated with Syria to attack from both sides at the same time. They cut off the Straits of Tiran, which is an act of war. That was war. And Israel came back and begged King Hussein of Jordan, stay out of this. 2 fronts is enough, and we have no designs on your so-called West Bank. We're offering you peace. We're not going to bother you. And Hussein made war anyway. And so Israel had to fight self-defense. Israel no longer, as they're going through Judea, Samaria, and East Jerusalem, no longer had an obligation every foot of the way to say, now will you stop? 5 more feet. Now will you make peace? 5 more feet. Now will you make... Once you fight, you fight. Until he begged for peace. And then when he begged for peace, then he got peace. At which time we were at the Jordan River, and we had our Bayit B'Yadenu, Temple Mount in our hands. So we didn't cross the Jordan and take the rest of the promised land, because we've been learning about all that promised land east of the Jordan, where the tribes of Reuven, Gad, and half of Manasseh had land. That was also 2.5 tribes east of the Jordan. We didn't take that. Had he not sued for peace, I don't know what they would have done. They might have taken that. That would have been very interesting. Then you would have had what Jabotinsky had dreamt of, taking the land east of the Jordan also. Jabotinsky wrote a song about the Jordan River, in which he refers to the Jordan River as the middle of Israel. So do the math on that. Instead of the Jordan River being on the east border, Jordan River on the east, on the middle. The halakha is, when the other side is willing to surrender, you stop fighting. And it's always been the way, even in Torah times. So we're moving towards the end of this entire learning, but we still have a few sessions to go on the halacha of going to war. I'll take a look whether there are any questions or chats that seem to invite comment, including the children of Lot's daughters from that night. Yeah. Children of Lot's daughters, Ammon and Moav. Not sure how it was meant, but yeah. So that's tonight. We'll meet, God willing, Tisha B'Av, that's about 2.5 weeks from now. I'm going to have a special program the Tuesday night of Tisha B'Av and Wednesday. We'll be doing it on Zoom, which is halachically appropriate, permitted. We'll be reading Eicha on Zoom. If you would go to a shul for Eicha, it could be more meaningful to be with a large in-person group where they turn the lights down and all of that, by all means. But for those who, for any reason, among many reasons, would opt to be with us and on the Zoom, be aware that will be an option. It started in 2020 with COVID, and it's been something that I have found, to my surprise, has been something that provides a service for a number of people who otherwise are not situated to go to shul late at night on Tisha B'Av night. So we'll be offering that. And then on Tisha B'Av day, we're going to have a special film presentation as well. That I think is going to be very moving. Thanks very much, and have a very good week. Oh, one last one. Sorry. The customs of the 17th of Av, of the 3 weeks. No haircuts. Just ran to get a haircut on Monday. No haircuts during the 3 weeks. No music during the 3 weeks. If you're watching something on TV and it happens to have music background, or you're watching a movie on TV with music background, you don't have to hold your ears to not hear them, but you're not allowed to listen to a concert or to go out of your way to listen to music. No live music, no live performances, like going to the theater or even to movies. A lot of people say you should not watch TV or movies at home. A lot of people say that's not an issue at home. Some stare away during the 9 days of watching comedy movies or comedy TV shows during the 9 days, but it's a more solemn time. The really heavier things will kick in during the 9 days. For those of you not acquainted with all of this, I don't want to mention them now so there's no confusion. The important thing now is no haircuts and no live public events. Whether even a serious drama, a serious movie, you're allowed to eat out, and you're allowed to eat meat, you're allowed to drink wine, and we'll talk more when the 9 days come. So again, thank you very much for being here. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.